I refused to give my sister money, so she tried to shame me at Dad's birthday. Years later, her gambling addiction ruins everything, and I'm left to pick up the pieces. I, 28F, have always had a complicated relationship with my older sister Jenny, 34F. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, we were close despite the age gap. Jenny was always the outgoing one, making friends easily and seeming to breeze through life. I was more introverted, preferring books and quiet hobbies. Despite our differences, Jenny always looked out for me, especially when I was bullied in middle school for my braces and glasses. Our parents, both hardworking middle-class folks, always emphasized the importance of education and financial responsibility. Dad worked as a high school teacher, and Mom ran a small bakery in town. They did their best to provide for us, but money was often tight. Things started to change when Jenny went to college. She got into Ohio State University, and our parents were thrilled. They scraped together every penny they could to help with her tuition. Jenny was the first in our family to go to a big university, and everyone had high hopes for her. However, college life didn't suit Jenny as well as we all expected. She struggled with the academic workload and spent more time partying than studying. After her first year, she dropped out, much to our parents' disappointment. She moved back home and took a series of part-time jobs, never seeming to find her footing. Meanwhile, I was determined to make the most of my opportunity when it was my turn for college. I worked hard in high school, got a scholarship to a state university, and juggled part-time jobs to minimize student loans. It wasn't easy, but I was motivated by the desire to make my parents proud and to avoid the struggles I saw Jenny going through. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a marketing firm in Cincinnati. The pay wasn't great at first, but I was excited about the opportunity. I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and bringing lunch to work every day to save money. Over the next few years, I worked my way up in the company. It wasn't always smooth sailing. I had my share of difficult projects and demanding clients. There were nights I stayed at the office until midnight, working on presentations and campaigns. But my hard work paid off, and I slowly climbed the ranks. Jenny's life, on the other hand, continued to be turbulent. She moved out of our parents' house after a big fight about her lack of direction. She bounced between jobs and apartments, often calling home for money to cover rent or bills. Our parents helped when they could, but it put a strain on their finances, especially after Dad had to take early retirement due to health issues. Last year, all my hard work finally culminated in a big promotion. I became the youngest team leader in my department, which came with a significant pay raise. I was thrilled because it meant I could finally afford a down payment on a small house in the suburbs. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. Jenny found out about my promotion through our mom. At first, she seemed genuinely happy for me. She called to congratulate me and even suggested we celebrate together. I was touched by her enthusiasm and thought maybe this could be a turning point in our relationship. But then the requests for money started. It began with small amounts, $50 here, $100 there. She'd always had some excuse: her car needed repairs, she was short on rent, or she had an unexpected medical bill. I helped her out a few times, thinking it was temporary. I remembered how she had always been there for me when we were kids, and I wanted to return the favor. But the requests kept coming, and the amounts kept increasing. Last month, she asked me for $3,000, claiming she needed it for a security deposit on a new apartment. She said her current place had black mold, and she needed to move urgently. I was hesitant, but she promised to pay me back in installments. She even offered to write up an agreement. Against my better judgment, I gave her the money, hoping this would be the thing that helped her get back on her feet. 2 weeks later, Jenny called me again, this time asking for $5,000. She said she lost her job at the restaurant where she was waiting tables and needed help covering her bills until she found a new one. I was shocked. She hadn't mentioned losing her job when she asked for the security deposit money. When I asked her about it, she got defensive and said it had just happened. I refused, reminding her that she still owed me $3,000. Jenny got angry and accused me of being selfish and abandoning family in their time of need. She brought up all the times she had helped me when we were younger, saying I owed her for that. She even suggested that I was showing off with my new house and car, and that I should be more willing to help those less fortunate. I stood my ground, telling her I couldn't keep supporting her financially. I offered to help her look for job openings or work on her resume, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be giving her any more money. Jenny hung up on me, and we didn't speak for days. Then last weekend, our parents invited the whole family over for a barbecue to celebrate my dad's birthday. It was a tradition we'd had since we were kids, with aunts, uncles, and cousins all gathering in the backyard for Dad's famous grilled ribs. I was hesitant to go, knowing Jenny would be there, but I didn't want to miss my dad's celebration. When I arrived, Jenny acted as if nothing had happened. She hugged me and asked how I was doing. I thought maybe she had cooled off and we could move past the argument. But as the afternoon wore on, Jenny started making snide comments about my new house and car. She kept bringing up how some people have it easy in life while others struggle. Our cousins and aunts looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. I tried to steer the conversation to other topics, asking about our cousin's new baby and Uncle Jim's recent retirement, but Jenny kept finding ways to bring it back to money and success. Finally, during dinner, as we all sat around the big picnic table in the backyard, Jenny stood up and announced she wanted to make a toast. She started talking about how proud she was of her little sister who had made it big in the corporate world. Then she turned to me and said, "Sarah, I know you have more than enough money now. Don't you think it's time you helped out your struggling big sister? After all, family should always come first." I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was trying to guilt-trip me in front of our entire family. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I would respond. Something in me snapped. I stood up and told everyone how Jenny had been constantly asking me for money, how I had already given her $3,000 that she hadn't repaid, and how she was now demanding $5,000 more. Our family was shocked. Aunt Lisa gasped audibly, and Uncle Jim nearly choked on his beer. Jenny tried to interrupt, claiming I was exaggerating, but I pulled out my phone and showed them the text messages as proof. Jenny's face turned red, and she stormed out of the house, slamming the back gate so hard that Mom's wind chimes fell off the porch. In the aftermath, reactions were mixed. My parents were upset that I aired our dirty laundry in front of everyone. They said I should have handled it privately. Mom was near tears, saying she had raised us to support each other, not to fight like this. Dad was quieter, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Some of my cousins, particularly those who had their own experiences with Jenny's borrowing habits, thought I did the right thing by exposing her behavior. Cousin Emily pulled me aside and told me she had lent Jenny money last year and never got it back. Others, like Aunt Lisa, thought I had embarrassed Jenny unnecessarily and that family matters should be kept private. As the party broke up, there was an uncomfortable tension in the air. What should have been a happy celebration of Dad's birthday had turned into a family drama. I helped Mom clean up in silence, neither of us knowing quite what to say. I left the barbecue feeling conflicted. I didn't want to cause a scene at my dad's birthday, but I was tired of Jenny taking advantage of me and then trying to make me look bad. The drive home was a blur of replaying the events in my mind, wondering if I had done the right thing. Now, a few days later, I'm still grappling with the fallout. Jenny hasn't spoken to me since the barbecue, and my parents have been distant. I stand by my decision not to give Jenny more money, but I'm questioning whether I handled the situation in the best way. Ida for refusing to give my sister more money and exposing her lies at the family gathering? Update 1. It's been about 3 weeks since the incident at my dad's birthday barbecue, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give an update on the situation with my sister Jenny. The day after the barbecue, my mom called me. She was upset about what had transpired and insisted that I needed to apologize to Jenny for embarrassing her in front of the family. I could hear the strain in her voice. Mom had always been the peacekeeper in our family, and I knew this conflict between her daughters was tearing her apart. I refused to apologize, explaining that I was tired of being manipulated and that Jenny was the one who should apologize for her behavior. I reminded Mom of all the times Jenny had borrowed money from them, of the stress it had put on their finances, especially after Dad's early retirement. Mom sighed heavily, and I could almost see her rubbing her temples the way she always did when she was stressed. Then Mom dropped a bombshell. Apparently, Jenny had told her that she needed the money because she was in trouble with some loan sharks. She claimed she had borrowed money from them to start a small online boutique selling handmade jewelry, but the business failed, and now they were threatening her. Mom's voice shook as she begged me to reconsider helping Jenny, saying she feared for her safety. I was skeptical. Jenny had a history of making up stories to get money, and this seemed like another elaborate lie. I remembered the time in high school when she convinced our parents she needed money for a school trip, only for them to find out later she had used it to buy concert tickets. Or the time she told me she needed cash for a root canal, but I later saw her with a new designer handbag. I decided to do some digging. I reached out to Jenny's ex-boyfriend, Mike, 35M, whom she had dated for 3 years before breaking up about 6 months ago. Mike and I had always gotten along well. He was a down-to-earth guy who worked as a physical therapist. I thought he might have some insight into Jenny's situation. Mike agreed to meet me for coffee at a local diner. As we sat in a booth, the smell of coffee and pancakes filling the air, Mike looked uncomfortable. He fidgeted with his napkin as he told me what he knew. What Mike revealed was shocking. Jenny had never started a business. Instead, she had a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control over the past year. It had started innocently enough, a few scratch-off tickets here and there, an occasional trip to the casino with friends. But soon Jenny was spending more and more time gambling, convinced that her big win was just around the corner. She had maxed out multiple credit cards and taken out several payday loans to fund her addiction. Mike said he had broken up with her when he discovered she had stolen his credit card information to place online bets. The betrayal was evident in his voice as he recounted finding hundreds of dollars in charges from online poker sites. I was stunned. I knew Jenny had issues with money management, but I never imagined it was this bad. I felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and concern for my sister. The Jenny I knew, the one who had stood up for me against bullies, who had taught me how to apply makeup for my first school dance, seemed so far removed from this person Mike was describing. I decided to confront Jenny with this information. I texted her asking to meet, suggesting we get together at the small park near our childhood home. It was a place filled with memories, summer picnics, learning to ride bikes, lazy afternoons reading under the big oak tree. When Jenny arrived, I could see the stress and exhaustion on her face. Her hair, which she had always taken such pride in, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she seemed to have lost weight since I last saw her. Before she could say anything, I told her everything I had learned from Mike. I watched as the color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she was going to deny it, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. Jenny broke down crying, admitting that it was all true. Through her sobs, Jenny explained how it had all started. After losing her job at an insurance company 2 years ago, she had felt lost and depressed. She had gone to a casino with some friends, hoping to cheer herself up, and had won a small jackpot. The high from that win had been intoxicating, and she found herself chasing that feeling again and again. She told me how ashamed she felt, how she had been too embarrassed to tell anyone about her gambling addiction. She had convinced herself that if she could just win big once, she could pay everyone back and turn her life around. But the big win never came, and she found herself spiraling deeper and deeper into debt. I listened to Jenny's story, feeling a mix of sympathy and frustration. I told her that while I understood she was struggling, I couldn't continue to enable her behavior by giving her money. I offered to help her find a Gamblers Anonymous meeting and look into addiction counseling programs, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be giving her any more financial support. Jenny seemed to understand, but she was clearly disappointed. She asked if I would at least consider helping her pay off some of her debts so she could start fresh. I refused, telling her that she needed to take responsibility for her actions and find a way to resolve her debts on her own. I suggested she look into credit counseling services or possibly even bankruptcy as a last resort. As we were leaving the park, walking past the playground where we had spent so many summer days as kids, Jenny asked if I would keep her gambling problem a secret from our parents and the rest of the family. She was worried about disappointing them, especially Dad, who had always been so proud of his girls. I told her I wouldn't actively tell anyone, but I also wouldn't lie if asked directly. Jenny wasn't happy with this, but she accepted it. As we parted ways, I gave her a hug, the first real hug we'd shared in years. She felt fragile in my arms, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the vulnerable big sister I used to look up to. I left the meeting feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was glad to finally know the truth and to have stood my ground. On the other hand, I was worried about Jenny and how she would move forward from this. The road ahead of her seemed long and difficult, and I wasn't sure how much I could or should be involved. As I drove home, I found myself thinking about our childhood, about the sister who had taught me to ride a bike, who had smuggled ice cream up to my room when I was sick, who had cheered the loudest at my high school graduation. I wondered how we had ended up here, and if there was any way back to the close relationship we once had. I'm still processing everything and trying to figure out how to maintain a relationship with my sister while also protecting myself from her manipulative behavior. It's a delicate balance, and I'm not sure I've figured it out yet. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time, hoping that Jenny will get the help she needs and that someday, we might be able to rebuild the bond we once had. Update 2. It's been about 2 months since my last update, and the situation with Jenny has taken some unexpected turns. After our meeting at the park, Jenny seemed to be making an effort to turn her life around. She started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week at a community center downtown. She even got a part-time job at the local grocery store, working as a cashier. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and I was proud of her for taking those first steps. Our parents were relieved to see Jenny making positive changes, although they still didn't know about her gambling addiction. Jenny had decided to tell them she was attending support group meetings for general life skills and stress management, which wasn't entirely untrue. I kept my promise not to reveal her secret, but I encouraged her to be honest with them when she felt ready. Things were relatively calm for a few weeks. Jenny and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship. We started having weekly phone calls, where we'd catch up on each other's lives. It wasn't always easy, there were awkward silences and moments of tension, but it felt like progress. I was cautiously optimistic about her progress and the future of our relationship. However, that all changed last week. I was at work, in the middle of a presentation to a potential client, when my phone started buzzing incessantly. I ignored it at first, but when I saw 6 missed calls from my mom during a quick break, I knew something was wrong. I stepped out of the meeting and called her back immediately. I heard panic in her voice as soon as she answered. She was in tears, telling me that Jenny had disappeared. Apparently, Jenny hadn't shown up for work for 3 days, and when our mom went to check on her at her apartment, she found it empty. Jenny's phone was going straight to voicemail, and none of her friends had heard from her. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I immediately suspected that Jenny had relapsed and gone on a gambling binge. I didn't want to break Jenny's trust, but given the circumstances, I felt I had no choice but to tell our parents about her addiction. They were shocked and devastated, blaming themselves for not noticing the signs earlier. We filed a missing persons report with the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do since Jenny was an adult and there was no evidence of foul play. We spent the next few days calling hospitals, shelters, and even casinos in neighboring cities, but came up empty-handed. The stress of the situation was palpable. Mom was barely sleeping, spending hours by the phone hoping Jenny would call. Dad, who had always been the calm one in crisis situations, looked lost and helpless. I took time off work to help with the search, driving around the city looking for any sign of my sister. Then, 5 days after she disappeared, Jenny showed up at my door. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I had just been about to go to bed when I heard a weak knock. I opened the door to find Jenny standing there, looking terrible, disheveled, exhausted, and clearly hadn't showered in days. She broke down crying as soon as I opened the door, begging me to let her stay with me. Through her sobs, Jenny confessed that she had indeed relapsed. She had withdrawn all the money from her bank account and gone to Atlantic City, convinced she could win big and solve all her problems. Instead, she lost everything and ended up sleeping in her car for 2 nights before finally coming back. She was too ashamed to go to our parents, so she came to me instead. I was torn. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face after all the worry and stress she had put our family through. The memory of Mom's tearful phone calls and Dad's defeated expression was fresh in my mind. But seeing her so broken and vulnerable, I couldn't turn her away. I let her in but made it clear that this was temporary and that she needed to call our parents immediately to let them know she was safe. Jenny agreed to call our parents, who were relieved but angry. They wanted her to come home, but Jenny insisted she wanted to stay with me. She said she felt too ashamed to face them right now. I reluctantly agreed to let her stay for a week while we figured out a long-term plan. Now, I'm in a difficult position. I want to help my sister, but I'm worried about the impact this will have on my own life and mental health. I've hidden my valuables and important documents, and I'm keeping a close eye on my bank accounts. I've also taken time off work to ensure Jenny doesn't do anything reckless while staying with me. Our parents are pushing for Jenny to move back home with them, but Jenny is resistant to the idea. She claims she feels more comfortable with me, but I suspect she thinks I'll be easier to manipulate than our parents. I'm struggling to find the right balance between supporting my sister and protecting myself. I know Jenny needs help, but I'm not sure I'm equipped to provide it. The whole situation has left me feeling drained and conflicted. I love my sister, but I'm also angry at her for putting us all through this ordeal. I'm trying to be supportive, but I also feel like I need to maintain firm boundaries. As I write this, Jenny is asleep on my couch. I can hear her restless tossing and turning, and I wonder what the coming days will bring. I'm hoping we can find a way forward that helps Jenny without compromising my own well-being, but right now, that path isn't clear. Update 3. It's been a month since my last update, and I wanted to share the latest developments in the situation with Jenny. After staying with me for a week, Jenny agreed to move back in with our parents. It wasn't an easy decision for her, but she realized she needed more support than I could provide while working full-time. Our parents set strict ground rules, including mandatory attendance at GA meetings and regular check-ins with a therapist specializing in addiction. The first couple of weeks were rough. Jenny struggled with the loss of independence and the constant supervision. There were several heated arguments between her and our parents, and a few times, she threatened to leave. But gradually, things started to improve. Jenny's therapist suggested she find a hobby to occupy her time and mind. To everyone's surprise, Jenny took up gardening. She spent hours in our parents' backyard, planting vegetables and flowers. It seemed to have a calming effect on her, and for the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the sister I remembered from our childhood. One Saturday, I visited my parents' house and found Jenny covered in dirt, proudly showing off her newly planted tomato seedlings. There was a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. We spent the afternoon working in the garden together, and for a few hours, it felt like old times. However, just as things were looking up, we hit another snag. Jenny's ex-boyfriend Mike reached out to me, revealing that Jenny owed him over $10,000. Apparently, before their breakup, she had convinced him to co-sign on a loan, claiming it was for a car. Mike had just discovered that the loan was actually used for gambling. I was furious. Jenny had lied to me again, omitting this crucial information when she confessed about her gambling problem. I confronted her about it, and she broke down, admitting she was too ashamed to tell me the full extent of her debts. She begged me not to tell our parents, fearing it would undo all the progress she had made. This revelation caused a rift in our family. I felt obligated to inform our parents, which led to another round of arguments and tears. Our parents wanted to help pay off Mike to protect Jenny from potential legal trouble, but I strongly disagreed. I argued that Jenny needed to face the consequences of her actions and find a way to repay Mike herself. After a long family discussion that stretched late into the night, we reached a compromise. Our parents agreed not to pay Mike directly, but instead offered to match any money Jenny earned towards repaying the debt. Jenny got a second part-time job at a local nursery, inspired by her new gardening hobby, and committed to putting all of that income towards her debt to Mike. As for my relationship with Jenny, it's still complicated. I'm proud of the progress she's making, but I'm also wary of being too trusting. We're slowly rebuilding our bond, but this time with clearer boundaries. I've made it clear that while I'm here to support her emotional recovery, I won't be providing any financial assistance. Last week, Jenny invited me over for dinner. She cooked a meal using vegetables from her garden, and we had a long talk about our childhood and our hopes for the future. It wasn't all smooth, there were moments of tension when we discussed the past, but it felt like a step in the right direction. This whole experience has been a roller coaster, and I know we still have a long way to go. But for the first time in months, I feel cautiously optimistic about Jenny's future and our relationship as sisters. I'm learning that recovery isn't a straight line, and that supporting a family member through addiction is a complex, ongoing process. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time, celebrating the small victories, and hoping for the best.